Sisters and brothers, comrades and friends, a very, very warm welcome to the main event of Socialism 2018. Thank you for coming out tonight, for coming this weekend to join this festival of political debate on ideas to change the world. My name is Sarah Sachs-Eldridge. I'm the Socialist Party national organiser, and I'm going to be chairing the rally this evening. And what a lineup of speakers I have the privilege to introduce to you tonight. This rally is a very important event. Our goal in organising it is very ambitious. We meet at a time when suffering inflicted by capitalism is at horrendous levels. I don't need to spell that out here. The aim of this rally is to provide the ideas to fight back and win for the working class in Britain and internationally. That means the fight for a socialist alternative to the chaos of capitalism. The background, as we know, is a world in turmoil, of upheavals, of changes taking place at a rapid pace, of instability of governments, of leaders, of uncertainty, and of course of suffering of the 99%, but also of explosive struggles and the need to link them up. But these, like the Uber strikes, like the Google walkouts, like the McDonald's strikes, like the struggles you're going to hear about tonight, are only the early warning system of the mass events ahead that we are preparing for. But we cannot wait for 2020 to get rid of Trump, 2022 to get rid of the Tories. 100 years ago, revolution ended World War I, but brutal wars today, destroying lives in Syria, in Yemen, capitalist politicians like Trump threatening humanity by ratcheting up tensions to serve their own interest. We're here to fight the right. Trump, the Tories, Bolsonaro in Brazil, the Blairites blocking Corbyn, and the rest of the defenders of the capitalist system have no solutions to the problems we face of impending environmental catastrophe, of crippling poverty, of inequality, of austerity that compete to inflict ever more suffering. Recently, Trump's office produced a document warning against socialism. Here we have the Tories, the Blairites, trying to defend capitalism. But we know that poll after poll shows greater support, growing support for socialism, especially among young people. What is not clear, though, is how this support is going to be turned into the mass action to fight the right and fight for socialist change. And unfortunately, that is largely because the most prominent proponents of an anti-austerity position have not linked it with a program for building mass action and organizations of the working class and for a break with rotten capitalism. So the theme of this rally is that central task: how to fight and how to win. Marxists are realists, but we are also optimists. We don't flinch from the reality of the situation, the tasks before us. But we must look also to the potential and the possibilities that exist. And the working class represents the main potential. We don't welcome the suffering of the last 10 years since the economic crisis. But we do celebrate the developments in working class struggle, many of which you are going to hear about tonight. The lessons of experience being absorbed and the new layers reaching for the methods of working class struggle. We as socialists want to speed up those processes. So Socialism 2018 is a call to action to defend and fight for united struggle against the right, against its attacks, against its attempts to divide us, and to resist those who try to give us false hope that there are shortcuts rather than building the mass working class struggle that can deliver the change, the socialist change we need. So now, After my short words of introduction, I have the enormous privilege of introducing tonight's speakers. These are people, these are comrades with a record of struggle and of determination to take on whatever obstacles are put in front of us. So to begin, I am very happy to introduce our first speaker. Comrades here will know that the trade unions are the basic organizations of the working class through which millions of people can defend themselves against the bosses in the workplace. A very important thing for us today. As socialists, we fight and organize to make them as effective as possible. Chris Boff is currently standing for re-election as the Assistant General Secretary of the PCS, the Civil Service Union, on a socialist program of fighting against all cuts and austerity and for the maximum unity of workers in struggle. But don't just take my recommendation. Recently, we read that union reps at the National Gallery who had been fighting privatization, what they had to say about Chris. They said, "All we know is that experience has taught us that when the going gets tough, this branch can rely on Chris." So please give a very warm welcome to Chris Boff, Assistant General Secretary of the PCS.
Well, thanks, Sarah, and brothers and sisters, comrades. It's always a great honour and privilege to bring my personal and political solidarity to this rally and to share a platform with and listen to the reports of inspiring struggles that we're going to hear about, not just in the UK, but to hear from Juan in Spain, a political coming together, if I may say, that warms the cockles of the heart. That's testing Danny's translation. To hear from Sharma about the struggles in the United States and to celebrate the ideas of socialism, because what better or more important time to celebrate those ideas than in the here and now? In a world dominated by a tiny elite, the richest 1% own half of the entire global wealth, while 3.5 million, 70% of the world's working population possess a miserly 2.7% of global wealth. In the UK, the 7th richest economy in the world, we've seen since the financial crash an obscene transfer of wealth from the poorest towards the super rich, where an atrocity like Grenfell can occur in one of the richest boroughs in the world. While we've also seen a ruthless assault on the poorest and most vulnerable in our society in the name of so-called benefits reform, hitting the disabled people with particular force, forcing over 1 million people to survive on food banks, and the social catastrophe that is universal credit that must be fought until the Tories are forced to scrap it. The election of Trump in the United States, the growth of the far right in Europe, history reminding us of the need to mobilize against the racists and the fascists whenever they rear their ugly face, but history also reminding us of the need to always put a socialist alternative to the conditions upon which the racists and the fascists feed. And all the while, capitalism's voracious pursuit of profit brings the planet inexorably closer to environmental disaster. Faced with this, to paraphrase Marx, it is socialist ideas that can not just explain the world, but can help us change it. Because in Britain, after 30 years of a high-octane, deregulated form of capitalism, third of manufacturing went to the wall, finance sector built on explosion of credit and reckless speculation, a service sector built on poverty wages and super exploitation, unions tied up in a panoply of anti-union laws. We were told all of this was the road to salvation. And instead, we see the financial crash, the financial system coming close to meltdown, bailed out with unimaginable amounts of public money that we find out was ours, that we have to repay, and becomes the pretext for the biggest assault on the social gains won by the British working class in post-war years. And it's in this context that Socialist Party comrades in PCS have worked as part of the left, have played, I would argue, an absolutely pivotal role in defeating a rotten right wing with proven links to Thatcher and the security services. The role that we played in fighting back to defend our members and galvanising wider support for public action against austerity, and in defying attempts by the Tories to break our union, in the words of a paper put to the HMRC board, how to achieve the organisational degradation of PCS's capacity to represent its members. They attacked our facility time. They tried to choke off our finances. Well, I'm pleased to report that we re-signed the overwhelming majority of members back into the union. And as an added bonus, we've managed to force £3 million in compensation from the Department of Work and Pensions that we're now going to happily pay for our industrial action in the future. So PCS have defied these attacks, and we fight on. And these attacks on PCS, of course, and in fact the attacks on the British trade union movement and the anti-union laws are not, as we know, because unions are irrelevant and some relic of past struggles, but in fact for reasons precisely the opposite. And it is the bosses and the capitalist class who understand that. And I must say, in this situation, I believe the launch of the public campaign by Mark Sawatka and Janice Godrich to replace me as AGS and conduct a political attack on the Socialist Party is a serious error of judgment and is damaging to both the left and the union, and will be only celebrated by the enemies of the union and our employer. I want to thank the party, the comrades, both in PCS and outside, for your support. And rather than the coronation that was expected, we are in fact in the middle of a major campaign that has won support right across the union from areas like the National Gallery. All the better new young reps are coming towards our campaign, a campaign based on our record, on union democracy, on a leadership that's prepared to learn the lessons of the pay ballot, about how we mobilise members to secure the necessary legal mandate for industrial action, how we link the fight on pay with the stream of attacks on jobs and conditions we see in the civil service, and how, on the one hand, we can build through the TUC and, I should say, direct with those unions that are preparing to fight, to build the mass action that we've needed for far too long in Britain that can defeat an enfeebled Tory government. Now, whatever the outcome of the Left Unity or PCS membership election that takes place next year, for public sector workers in the civil service, in local government, in social care, in NHS, in schools, in FE colleges, universities, in emergencies and the fire services, the idea that austerity is over is an absolutely sick joke. Now, the TUC met and celebrated its 150th anniversary. It has a proud history of struggle, but you could be confused into thinking that the low strike figures, the decline in density, the reduction in union membership, the rise in the average age of trade unionists, of course, that is a result of a calculated attack by the ruling class, most notably in the defeat of the miners, and of course it's a failure of the TUC to mobilise a fight back. But my point being that this disguises that workers, the real fact that workers need unions now more than ever. It disguises the latent power of unions, and to rebuild and to reach out to the millions of unorganised workers on poverty pay and precarious conditions. We need to learn from and follow the example set by the RMT, defending public safety, the magnificent campaign of the CWU to defend its pension scheme, the Bakers and Unite and independent voices like United Voices, organising some of the super-exploited workers in the capital, and the most magnificent strike of Unison and GMB members in Glasgow to win equal pay. And like the strike at Dagenham in the 60s, this sets an absolutely marvellous example. And of course, the opposition of Labour and the opposition of the SNP and all of the opposition met to any group of workers fighting to win equal pay is not just because it's going to cost them $1 billion in Glasgow, because it opens up the possibilities of victories in every single town hall and every local authority in the UK. So let me just by finishing, let me just say I want to bring, and thank you for the opportunity to bring solidarity from my union, from a personal and political perspective, to all workers in struggle in UK and internationally. That union comrades, I'm sure, will play a big part in the discussions this weekend, in the resurgence of socialist ideas, where unions will play an absolutely central part in the struggle of the workers of the world against capitalism, against climate change, to win what is rightfully ours and to win a socialist world. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that excellent contribution. And for those who want to know more about the real issues at stake in the AGS election that Chris mentioned, it'll be one of the 12 workshops taking place tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And I think it's clear from the room tonight that I am not alone here in not just wishing Chris good luck, but in pledging that we are going to do all we can to fight for your re-election. And Chris has helped to introduce the next speaker, because we are going to continue on the theme of fighting trade unionists. And I am enormously proud to be able to introduce Denise, who has travelled all the way down from Glasgow to address us. Denise Phillips. Denise Phillips is the Secretary of Home Care in Glasgow City Unison and is a leader of the 8,500 strong Glasgow working class women who made history earlier in October in one of the biggest ever strikes in the UK on the issue of equal pay. So I don't need to go any further. I know you want to hear from her.
As you know, my name is Denise Phillips. I've been a home carer for 18 years in Glasgow. Back in December 2017, after Scotland's top judges refused Glasgow City Council permission to appeal the equal pay victory. And 8 months ago, we marched through Glasgow dressed as the suffragettes in recognition of the fight for equality for women. We spoke in George Square, demanding a fair and transparent pay and grading system and full compensation for the pay we were denied. Susan Aiken was at that demonstration in February, made promises to the women that she would settle these claims. Well, what happened? Here we are again. Despite the promises, and also on May Day, we were another demo, dressed up in the 60s with the Dagenham outfits, which we had a fab day, very rememberable demo. And speakers, including myself, did speeches at the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow. We fought and won WPBR through the courts for 10 years, and thanks to Stephen Cross Action for Equality, who has been fighting this fight along with these women. Despite the Court of Session ruling against Glasgow City Council in August 2017, they have failed to make any real progress on agreeing compensation for the past pay discrimination, yet they claim to be an equal opportunity employer. Not in my eyes. Yes, there have been meetings prior to this strike day, 10 months of meetings about meetings, because sure not about our equal pay. So this is why us women demanded action, because enough is enough. Yes, they agreed WPBR discriminates against women and would be replaced with another job evaluation scheme. Well, they lost this argument in court, so what choice did they have? So, on the 23rd and 24th of October, we went out on strike. We brought our city to a standstill. Along with thousands of women with their colleagues and families gathered to tell Glasgow City Council to pay up. There was carers, cleaners, caterers, school workers. Us women have waited 12 years of fighting this, so too long, enough was enough. Dozens of picket lines were from 7 a.m. and before, and did again on the second day of strike. The work involved on the strike days, we had union support all the way, having members coming in with stewards to collect items. 2,000 placards were made, 5,000 whistles were given out. Picketed stewards, we had 173 in total, given out 20,000 leaflets. The ballot through was 70% Cordia ex Cordia, 55% education, all voted for strike, 99% Cordia, 90% education. On strike, 5,500 Unison members out on strike, 2,500 GMB attended. On the streets of Glasgow that day was 10,000. Increased to ours was 11% new stewards. 53 became on board through our strike action, wanted to be more involved and give strength to our union. Our members from both Unison and GMB are united together. We are fed up of empty promises. We all wanted progress, real progress on key elements that will made up payouts, due not how much it will cost. This is not a bonus, this is money we rightly deserve. These wages earned that was stolen from us, women and Glasgow City Council, been robbing us for years. They should be totally ashamed, totally. Glasgow City Council has focused on process. We want agreements to our comparatives, past shift and protection, payments, past overtime payments, the rates of interest to be applied and parity between all the claimants. There's plenty of money in society, it's just in the wrong hands. Settlement based on entitlement, not cost. Tax the super rich, no need for the cuts in the service. No need to rob Peter to pay Paul. It's substance we want, our members. Patience has won thin. Glasgow City Council have demonstrated our commitment they are to settle these claims. When they knew we were taking strike action, they stopped all negotiations, not talking to the unions, a case of the free monkeys. There was no attempt by Glasgow City Council to resolve this dispute. Glasgow City Council knew about the strike 3 weeks prior. We did not want to go and leave our clients without care, schools to be shut, affecting children and families losing pay, which none of us can afford. But this could have been easily avoided if the council followed through with their promises. Instead, the council is escalating more costs every day this goes on, as we are not prepared to give up this fight until we get what we truly deserve. Action for equality, Unison, GMB, Unite, all members are all clear. They want action, not words or empty promises. Okay, that's it. Right, I'd like to finish up. Everyone included, our co-workers deserve what we are due, and I think we have waited long enough. And let's not forget the members who have passed away waiting on justice. And let's us be very clear, I've no doubt if there is no progress, we will be back out on strike. The long march for equality will continue and we'll never ever give up this fight. We have all received what we rightly deserve from Glasgow City Council, so pay us up and Last but not least, I would like to thank the support of all the Socialist Party for inviting us up from Glasgow, and a massive thank you to Brian Smith. Thanks for listening.
What a fantastic contribution that was to our rally tonight. Thank you very much, Denise. And just to let you know that tomorrow you can also hear from Isabel, who travelled down with Denise. She's going to be one of the speakers in the Women's Lives Matter panel discussion in the afternoon. Our next speaker has travelled even further, from Madrid. And we are very privileged to be welcoming Juan Ignacio Ramos, the General Secretary of Izquierda Revolucionaria, or IR, in the Spanish state. Over the last years, many of you will be following the convulsions that have racked the Spanish state, waves of resistance of the Catalan people for independence, against austerity, of the students, of the women, and so on. And in every one of those, IR has been present, raising socialist ideas. Now, the theme of tonight is how we fight the right. And one of the best ways we can do that most effectively is by building up the forces of socialism as rapidly and effectively as we can. So the last time Juan Ignacio spoke at our socialism rally was in 2016, when our international, the international to which the Socialist Party is affiliated, the Committee for a Workers' International, was collaborating with and discussing with the sections of IR in the Spanish state, in Venezuela, in Mexico. And today, Juan Ignacio is here as the leader of the CWI in the Spanish state. That unification has strengthened not just the CWI, but the working class internationally. So please welcome Juan Ignacio.
Bueno, camaradas, amigos y amigas, en primer lugar me gustaría trasladar un saludo fraternal y revolucionario desde el Estado español de los camaradas del CIT en el Estado español.
Comrades, first of all, to bring fraternal and internationalist revolutionary greetings from all the comrades of the CWI in the Spanish state.
Como sabéis, en la ocasión anterior que estuve hace 2 años, iniciábamos un proceso de debates y de discusión muy fecunda con los camaradas del Socialist Party de la Internacional, que ha concluido en nuestra unificación y en nuestra integración, y estamos absolutamente convencidos de que ha sido una de las decisiones políticas más importantes y positivas que jamás hayamos tomado.
So as you know, last time I was here 2 years ago, we were beginning a process of debate, discussion and collaboration with the Socialist Party and the CWI, which resulted in the unification of our forces, and we have no doubt that this was one of the most historic, important and positive decisions we've ever made.
Es evidente que vivimos una época histórica completamente excepcional.
We live in an exceptional historical period.
El sistema capitalista está recorrido por contradicciones económicas, sociales y políticas y no ha sido todavía capaz de encontrar el reequilibrio que ha perdido.
The capitalist system is ridden with political, social and economic contradictions, and it's not been in any way able to overcome those and leave the crisis.
A 10 años del estallido de la gran recesión, la mayoría de los estrategas de la burguesía miran con incertidumbre y con pesimismo el futuro, y no es para menos.
10 years after the beginning of this crisis, most of the bourgeois strategists still see the situation with pessimism and uncertainty, and that is correct.
Los recortes, la austeridad, la enorme crisis de deuda pública que han provocado en todo el planeta no ha resuelto ninguno de los problemas a los que se enfrentaban.
The cuts, the austerity, the multi-million problem of public debt all over the world, none of these things has resolved the fundamental problems.
Al contrario, han colocado mucho más material combustible en la base de la sociedad.
Quite the contrary, they've just added more fuel to the fire.
La inversión productiva se reduce.
The productive investment is falling.
La especulación financiera vuelve a ser la nota dominante.
Financial speculation is becoming more and more dominant.
Los países emergentes se hunden.
The so-called emerging countries are collapsing.
Turquía, Argentina, Brasil.
Turkey, Argentina, Brazil.
El capitalismo se encuentra en un callejón.
Capitalism is in a cul-de-sac.
Y todas las medidas de nacionalismo económico que están adoptando en Estados Unidos, en Europa o en China no hace más que agravar la situación.
And all these measures of economic nationalism that are being taken in the United States, in Europe and China, all they do is make the situation worse.
La perspectiva de una nueva recesión económica está en el orden del día.
The perspective of a new economic recession is on the agenda.
Pero incluso antes de que ese fenómeno se dé,
But even before that happens,
estamos asistiendo a procesos políticos, a fenómenos políticos que demuestran la necesidad del socialismo y del poder obrero.
we're seeing many processes, political and social processes around the world, which show us the necessity of socialism and workers' power.
Hay una crisis aguda de la democracia burguesa.
There's a terrible crisis of bourgeois democracy.
La estabilidad de décadas anteriores ha sido barrida de la escena.
The stability of previous decades has been crushed.
Los partidos tradicionales que garantizaron la estabilidad política durante décadas están en una crisis país tras país.
All the political parties that guaranteed political stability for so many years are in terrible crisis all over the
La
world.
derecha tradicional, los socialdemócratas, en todo el mundo, no hacen pie.
The traditional right wing and the social democracy all over the world.
Como escribió León Trotsky en el 34 en un gran libro, ¿A dónde va Francia?, que es de obligada lectura en estos momentos.
As Leon Trotsky wrote in 1934 in a book called Whither France, which is an obligatory must-read book,
Los grandes fenómenos políticos siempre tienen profundas causas sociales.
all the most important political processes always have the deepest social roots.
La irrupción del chauvinismo populista de derecha, reaccionario, racista, sexista, como hemos visto, representado por Trump, por Salvini, por Bolsonaro,
The beginning of this wave of chauvinism, right-wing populism, racism, sexism, which is represented by Trump, by Bolsonaro.
las tendencias bonapartistas en el aparato del Estado y en la clase dominante, el autoritarismo,
The authoritarian and Bonapartist tendencies which are being pursued by the ruling class all over the world.
señala a la clase obrera la gran amenaza que se cierne sobre nosotros.
It points the working class towards a great threat to our lives.
Una gran amenaza que se puede transformar en algo peor
A threat which can become something worse
si no somos capaces de tomar el poder y de derribar el capitalismo.
if we're not able to take power and overthrow capitalism.
Es una advertencia muy seria
It's a serious warning.
y a la realidad hay que mirarla de cara si queremos transformarla.
And if we want to change reality, we have to look reality in the face.
Por supuesto, no queremos trasladar ningún mensaje depresivo,
Of course, we don't want to send any depressing message.
pero es cierto que los viejos demonios vuelven a surgir a la superficie.
But it's true that the demons of old are becoming visible again.
Y solamente con la lucha consciente y masiva de la clase obrera,
And only the conscious and mass struggle of the working class,
solamente construyendo un partido marxista revolucionario anclado en la clase trabajadora,
only building a revolutionary Marxist party rooted in the
vamos
working
a ser
class,
capaces de conjurar esta amenaza y de derrotarlos.
will we defeat this threat.
La victoria es una tarea estratégica.
Victory is the strategic task.
No depende solamente de la fuerza de la clase obrera ni de su potencial revolucionario.
And victory does not just depend on the numbers of the working class or its potential.
Y que la clase obrera y la juventud están dispuestas a dar la batalla y llegar hasta las últimas consecuencias es un hecho completamente incuestionable.
And the fact that the working class and the youth are prepared to struggle to the end is also an unquestionable fact.
Solamente los escépticos posmodernos de la izquierda pequeño burguesa, los burócratas conservadores o los reformistas postrados ante la clase dominante pueden negar esta evidencia.
Only the skeptical and cynical petty bourgeois postmodernists of the left or bureaucratic conservatives could deny that is true.
Y el Estado español es un buen ejemplo
And Spanish state is a good example
para subrayar esta idea.
to underline that.
Hace pocos meses que Rajoy tuvo que abandonar el gobierno
A few months ago, Rajoy had to abandon the government
después de que el Partido Socialista presentara una moción de censura.
when the Socialist Party put forward a no-confidence motion.
Algunos sectarios piensan que esto es una maniobra por arriba de la clase dominante. Quitamos a unos y ponemos a otros.
Some sectarians think this is just a maneuver by the elites to take out one and put in another.
Nosotros decimos que no, que esto es el resultado de la lucha de clases en el Estado español.
We say no, this is the result of the class struggle in Spain,
de las grandes movilizaciones que han recorrido nuestro país en el último año,
of the huge struggles in our country in the last year,
de la crisis revolucionaria en Cataluña,
the revolutionary crisis in Catalonia,
del movimiento de la mujer trabajadora que protagonizó una huelga histórica el 8 de marzo de este año,
the great movement of working class women which carried out a
del
historic strike,
movimiento de los pensionistas y de la juventud, de los estudiantes, en el que esta organización está jugando un papel de dirección y de
the
vanguardia.
mass movement of pensioners, the mass movement of students in which this organization plays a key role.
Más de 10 millones en el Estado español han participado en manifestaciones contra el gobierno de la derecha solo en estos 10 últimos meses.
Only in the last 10 months, 10 million people participated in mass protests against the government.
¿Cómo no podemos explicar los cambios bruscos que se producen en la política si no es por este hecho?
It's impossible to explain these sharp political changes without taking that into account.
Y en estos meses nos estamos encontrando con un nuevo escenario político.
And in the last months, we see a new political scenario.
En la práctica, hay un gobierno de coalición entre el Partido Socialista y Podemos.
In practice, there is now a coalition government between PSOE and Podemos.
Y por supuesto, millones de trabajadores y de jóvenes están muy contentos de haber acabado con la derecha en la Moncloa, ¿no?
And of course, millions of workers and youth are delighted that the right wing is out of the government.
Y no es para menos.
And that is correct.
Pero la pregunta que hay que hacerse es la siguiente.
But the question we have to ask is the following.
¿Responderá este gobierno, de hecho, entre PSOE y Podemos, a las aspiraciones de los millones de trabajadores y jóvenes que han salido a las calles durante estos años?
How will this government respond to the aspirations of the millions who have gone onto the streets in these last years?
¿Responderán a los millones que han protagonizado una lucha ejemplar en Cataluña por el derecho de autodeterminación en la República?
How will they respond to the millions in Catalonia who have struggled for self-determination?
¿Responderán al combate por las pensiones dignas, la educación digna, la sanidad pública y digna?
How will they respond to the fight for fair pensions and decent education?
¿Responderán al movimiento contra la violencia machista?
How will they respond to the movement against sexist violence?
¿Depurarán al aparato del Estado y al sistema judicial de fascistas y de reaccionarios?
Will they purge the state and the justice system of Francoist reactionaries?
Los hechos son concretos.
Truth is concrete.
Para empezar,
To begin,
el gobierno no ha hecho absolutamente nada por cambiar la situación en Cataluña.
this government has done nothing to change the situation in Catalonia.
Los presos políticos siguen en las cárceles,
The political prisoners are still in jail.
los exiliados siguen fuera del país
The exiles are still outside the country.
y dentro de un mes empieza el juicio
And in a month, the trial begins
contra el movimiento independentista, contra los dirigentes del movimiento independentista.
against the leaders of the pro-independence movement.
Y la Fiscalía del Estado ha pedido 25 años de prisión para cada uno de ellos por rebelión militar.
And the state prosecution is asking for 25 years in jail for all of them for a military rebellion.
Esto es lo que ocurre en el Estado español en el siglo XXI.
That's what happens in the Spanish state in the 21st century.
Esto se pide a dirigentes políticos, algunos de ellos dirigentes de derechas incluso nacionalista, por el único delito de haber puesto urnas para que el pueblo catalán pueda expresarse de manera democrática.
And this sentence is asked for against politicians, against even right-wing politicians, for the crime of putting ballot boxes in schools for people to vote.
Y sin embargo, hace 2 meses, 200 militares de alto rango, generales, coroneles, tenientes coroneles, publicaron una carta abierta en defensa de Franco y en contra de la exhumación de su cadáver que está expuesto en el Valle de los Caídos.
And on the other hand, only 2 months ago, over 200 top military officials, generals, lieutenants, etc., published an open letter in favor of Franco and against the removal of Franco's bones from the crypt.
¿Pasó algo?
Did anything happen to them?
Todos esos militares siguen en sus puestos.
They're still in their positions.
¿A alguien le extraña que cuando la Revolución Española empiece en el Estado español otra vez, no veremos las mismas escenas que el 19 de junio del 36?
So will anyone be surprised when the Spanish Revolution begins that we won't see again the scenes of 1936?
Están creando las condiciones para un estallido revolucionario en el Estado español.
They're creating the conditions for a new revolutionary explosion.
Así es como responde el Estado, el aparato del Estado, al movimiento de las masas en Cataluña.
That's how the state responds to this mass movement.
Millones de jóvenes y de trabajadores de sectores de las capas medias empobrecidas se han movilizado en Cataluña.
Millions of workers and youth and the impoverished middle class have gone onto the streets.
A favor de la República.
In favor of a republic.
En contra del régimen del 78.
Against the regime.
¡Viva la República Socialista de Cataluña!
Says long live the Socialist Republic.
Millones se han movilizado. ¿Y cuál ha sido nuestra postura? ¿Cuál ha sido la postura de los marxistas del CIT en Cataluña?
And what's been our position? What's been the position of the Marxists of the CWI in Catalonia?
¿Hemos observado los acontecimientos desde nuestra tribuna?
Have we just watched things from our tribune?
¿Hemos especulado sobre la conciencia de las masas?
Have we just speculated about the consciousness of the masses?
¿Hemos hablado de que no está claro este movimiento hacia dónde se dirige?
Have we just said, oh, we don't know where this thing is going?
No, hemos tenido una posición marxista consecuente.
No, we've had a consequent Marxist position.
Hemos intervenido con todas nuestras fuerzas defendiendo una política de clase independiente,
We've intervened with all our forces to defend a class-independent position,
levantando la bandera del socialismo.
the flag of socialism.
Sí, y hemos confrontado dentro del Movimiento de Liberación Nacional de Cataluña.
And also we've struggled within the movement for national liberation in Catalonia.
Pero nosotros somos una organización combatiente.
But we are a combat
No
organization.
somos marxistas académicos.
We're not academic Marxists.
Y hemos intervenido con todas nuestras fuerzas y con todas nuestras palancas para hacer avanzar al movimiento y hacer avanzar la conciencia.
We've intervened with all our forces, all our tools to push this movement forward and push consciousness forward.
En este último año, el Sindicato de Estudiantes, nuestra organización en Cataluña, ha convocado 6 huelgas generales.
In 1 year, the Students' Union, our organization in Catalonia, called 6 general strikes.
Hemos conquistado un espacio y una posición. Hemos conquistado una posición dentro de la izquierda independentista catalana.
We've conquered a position within the pro-independence left.
El pasado 1 de octubre en nuestra organización,
The last 1st of October,
el día 1 de octubre se conmemoraba un año de aquella jornada histórica, de aquel punto de inflexión en la crisis revolucionaria.
1 year since the great historic day and the turning point in the revolutionary crisis.
Cuando decenas de miles de trabajadores se enfrentaron en las calles contra la violencia policial y de la Guardia Civil.
When tens of thousands of workers confronted the violence of the state in the streets.
Y los derrotamos.
And defeated them.
Y votamos.
And voted.
2,5 millones votamos a favor de la República en Cataluña.
2.5 million people in favor of the Catalan Republic.
¿Qué mayor legitimidad hay para un movimiento precisamente lo que ocurrió el día 1 de octubre?
What movement could be more legitimate than that?
Nosotros no somos cretinos parlamentarios,
We're not parliamentary cretins.
no somos formalistas.
We're formalists.
Creemos en la democracia obrera.
We believe in workers'
Y
democracy.
cuando millones se levantan, votan, desafían al aparato del Estado y se enfrentan con la policía en las calles, ¿qué es eso sino una crisis revolucionaria?
And when millions of people rise up and confront the state and vote illegally to provoke a revolutionary crisis, what is that but a revolutionary crisis?
Y este 1 de octubre, nuestra organización convocó una huelga general contra la represión franquista, por la libertad de los presos políticos, por la República de los Trabajadores en Cataluña. Una huelga estudiantil en universidad y en enseñanza secundaria.
So this 1st of October, 1 year later, our organization called a national general student strike in Catalonia in favor of the Republic and for the release of the political prisoners.
Más de 700.000 estudiantes abandonaron las aulas y más de 150.000 desfilaron detrás de nuestras banderas en Barcelona.
More than 700,000 students went on strike and more than 150,000 marched behind our banners.
Pero ese día ocurrió también muchas cosas, esa jornada.
But other very important things happened that day.
Durante todo el día hubo movilizaciones en todo Cataluña.
There were mobilizations all over Catalonia.
Más de 1,5 millones de personas, de trabajadores, de jóvenes, de pensionistas, una gran parte de la población salió a las calles.
More than 1.5 million, a huge proportion of the population went onto the streets.
Y se produjo algo que ya habíamos previsto.
And something happened we hadn't predicted.
Una auténtica escisión en líneas de clase del Movimiento de Liberación Nacional.
There was a split along class lines in this national liberation
En
movement.
esas manifestaciones, cientos de miles en Barcelona y en otros sitios gritaban contra el presidente burgués de la Generalitat.
Hundreds of thousands of people in these demonstrations chanted against the bourgeois president of the Catalan Republic.
Y le dijeron, basta ya de pactos con el Estado y de buscar enterrar la lucha por la República.
They said enough of looking for deals with the Spanish government and stopping the struggle.
Si no quieres cumplir con el mandato del 1 de octubre, apártate.
If you don't want to carry out the mandate of the 1st of October, then get out of the way.
Y eso refleja el enorme potencial. Y eso refleja el enorme potencial revolucionario que hay en estos momentos en Cataluña, y la burguesía española y la burguesía catalana lo saben.
And this reflects the great revolutionary potential, and both the Catalan capitalists and the Spanish capitalists know that.
Si la República Catalana se impone con estos métodos, a través de la lucha en las calles, a través de la acción directa,
If a Catalan Republic is achieved with those methods, with the direct confrontation and action on the streets,
¿vosotros pensáis que la clase obrera va a tolerar un gobierno republicano en Cataluña para que siga aplicando recortes y austeridad?
Do you think that the working class will tolerate a Catalan government which continues to make austerity cuts?
Un gobierno así no duraría ni 2 meses en Cataluña.
It wouldn't even last months.
Y la burguesía sabe que el triunfo de la República en Cataluña abriría una crisis revolucionaria en todo el Estado.
And the bourgeoisie knows that a revolutionary republic in Catalonia would open up a revolution to hold the Spanish state.
Por eso han desatado una represión brutal contra el movimiento en Cataluña.
And that's why they've carried out this brutal repression.
Lamentablemente el Partido Socialista y Podemos
Unfortunately, PSOE and Podemos
se han puesto en contra de este movimiento.
have been against this movement.
El PSOE ha respaldado la represión abierta.
PSOE has supported this repression.
Y Podemos ha dicho
And Podemos said
que se abstiene de intervenir en esta
that it
batalla
abstains from this battle
porque no va con ellos.
because they're not with us.
Porque este movimiento no está claro
Because it's not clear
qué orientación tiene.
what orientation it has.
No hay más ciego que el que no quiere ver.
There's no one more blind who refuses to see.
Y yo os digo una cosa,
And I can say one
vamos
thing.
a tener el segundo ejemplo, el segundo Tsipras en el Estado español muy pronto.
In Spain, we'll soon have the second Tsipras that Europe has seen.
Pero a diferencia de lo que ha pasado en Grecia,
But different to what happened in Greece.
eso no va a provocar un retroceso de la lucha de clases, estoy convencido.
This will not, I'm convinced, mean a
Porque
step
el
backwards.
movimiento en el Estado español está aprendiendo mucho.
Because the movement in Spain is learning a lot.
De hecho, en estos momentos,
At the
a
moment,
pesar de todos los esfuerzos de enviar a la gente a casa,
despite all the attempts to demobilize the people
de desmovilizar y de imponer la paz social,
and impose social peace,
la situación es exactamente igual de conflictiva que hace un año.
the situation is just as conflictive as 1 year ago.
Los pensionistas están en pie de guerra.
The pensioners are on war footing.
Cientos de miles de pensionistas, pensarlo un poco, cientos de miles de pensionistas se están manifestando todas las semanas en el Estado español desde hace 6 meses.
Hundreds of thousands of pensioners are demonstrating every week in the Spanish state.
Y la juventud también.
And the youth as well.
De hecho, la próxima semana, el 14 de noviembre, hemos convocado una huelga general estudiantil en el Estado español
In fact, next week, on the 14th of November, we've called a new student general strike in Spain
contra el sexismo en las aulas,
against sexism in the classrooms,
contra el poder de la Iglesia Católica en las
against the
aulas,
power of the Catholic Church
contra
in
los
school
recortes.
and the cuts.
Y no va a haber ninguna duda, estamos seguros de que más de 1 millón de estudiantes van a ir a la huelga y decenas de miles irán a las más de 50 manifestaciones que ya hemos organizado.
And we're sure that more than 1 million students will go on strike that day, and there'll be tens of thousands on the demonstrations.
Pero lo más importante, hemos conseguido un frente único con los pensionistas.
And also, we've built a united front with the pensioners.
Ha habido un acuerdo público entre la coordinadora de pensionistas y el sindicato de estudiantes y los pensionistas van a estar junto con los jóvenes, los abuelos con los nietos, luchando en las calles.
There's a public declaration of agreement between the Students' Union and the Pensioners' Movement, and the pensioners and the students will be together in demonstrations on that day.
Y exactamente lo mismo también estamos haciendo en el movimiento obrero.
And that's the exact same as we're doing in the trade union movement.
El 13 de junio convocamos una huelga general del sector del metal en Cádiz,
In the 13th of June, we organized a general strike in the metal sector
superando las direcciones burocráticas,
against the will of the bureaucratic
organizando
leaders.
comités de acción en todos los centros de
We
trabajo.
organized committees of action in every workplace.
Y en el mes de septiembre organizamos una asamblea en Cádiz de más de 2.000 trabajadores.
And in September, we again organized an assembly of more than
Nosotros,
2,000
directamente
workers
con nuestros comités de acción.
through the committees of action.
Y esa asamblea votó por una nueva huelga general de 48 horas en el sector
Those assemblies voted
contra
for
la
a new-
precariedad,
They voted for a new general strike of 48 hours in that sector against precariousness,
por la dignificación de los salarios.
for dignity in work and wages.
Esto es un ejemplo
That's
de
an
cómo el
example.
marxismo puede, sí, penetrar, introducirse, ganar la audiencia, ganar el apoyo y ganar la simpatía de millones de jóvenes y de decenas de miles de
It's an
trabajadores.
example of how Marxism can penetrate and connect with the working class and the millions of youth.
Camaradas y amigos, no tengo más tiempo.
I have no more time.
La lucha por el socialismo es la lucha por la supervivencia de la humanidad,
The struggle for socialism is the struggle for survival of humanity,
por la preservación de todas sus conquistas económicas, sociales y culturales,
to preserve all of our economic, social, and political
y
conquests,
por defender también del medio ambiente en el que vivimos de la catástrofe
And
que se
defend-
cierne sobre él.
the environment from catastrophe.
Los y las revolucionarias del CID cumpliremos con nuestra obligación
The revolutionaries of the CWI will carry out our obligation,
y codo con nuestra clase levantaremos una organización que transformará el mundo entero.
and together with our class, we'll build a new world.
¡Viva el Socialist Party!
Okay. Thank you very much, Juan Ignacio. Ignacio, and you can hear more from Juan Ignacio tomorrow afternoon in the workshop. Sadly, I have to warn you that you have to choose. You can't go to all the workshops tomorrow afternoon. Sorry. To move on now to something that we don't want to have to talk about, but obviously the Tories represent the capitalist system, intrinsically unequal and because of that racist. When the former Tory Home Secretary Amber Rudd admitted she was unaware that her own department was deporting Windrush migrants, it revealed the contempt of the capitalist establishment. Our next speaker has been fighting for justice for the Windrush generation, but Hugo Pierre is also part of the Socialist Party's campaign for the trade unions and the working class to be to the fore in the fight against racism. Our slogan of jobs, homes and services, not racism, has this year been adopted by the TUC, but fighting to turn that into action is still necessary. So please welcome Hugo Pierre, a member of the National Executive of Unison, speaking in a personal capacity.
You haven't heard what I've got to say yet. Comrades, it is a real privilege to speak at this rally. And I think as a member of the Socialist Party, we all know that fighting racism is one of the key battles that the working class has to struggle to overcome. Without that, we open ourselves up for the ruling class to use divide and rule tactics against our disputes, against our struggles for the working class. Comrades, in 2014, the Tories unleashed a vicious Immigration Act. Who can forget the vans that were patrolling around the streets of our towns and cities? Go home or get arrested. Those were the vans that they had slogans on. That act introduced a 20,000 penalty for landlords, for public service providers and employers who couldn't verify the status of tenants and of employees and workers. Amongst its provisions also, it removed the rights of appeal against deportation until after you'd already been deported. Well, this was introduced by a government that was desperate to drive home their austerity agenda and also desperate to compete against UKIP on immigration policy. And who is the architect of that legislation? Yes, the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, Theresa May. But this year, her plan was exposed. It was exposed as a scandal that was used to illegally dismiss, detain, deport, and deny the rights to return of the so-called Windrush generation, a generation that was invited from Commonwealth countries to rebuild a war-torn Britain. A member I supported played a crucial role of exposing that scandal that affected an estimated 50,000 people. A scandal that led to a new Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, that's already been mentioned, resigning from her post. A scandal that led to an even newer Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, issuing apologies almost on a weekly basis for their illegal actions. And although they claim to be sorry for being caught out, how can we trust them? How can we trust them to put it right? And of course, we can't. But let's remember, they were warned publicly by 6 Labour MPs, and scandalously it was only 6, including Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell and Diane Abbott, that those with a legal right to remain would get caught in a Home Office driving through this act. They were also warned privately by civil servants when drafting that legislation that it would catch members of the Windrush generation, but yes, they drove on. But Michael, backed by his trade union, and others also involved and caught in that scandal, were able to expose it. And it's essential that the trade unions take it on. The trade unions must back their campaign for real justice. Yes, a real inquiry where workers can see all the decisions that were made right up to the very top. They must fight for full compensation for all the victims who lost their livelihoods, were separated from families, imprisoned in detention centres. The trade unions must also support all that need their status clarified. Only the trade unions can give that backing. We've heard stories where individuals have gone to see their MP to get advice, and the MPs have said, go and see the Home Office. Those people have ended up being deported. It's only the trade unions that can provide that advice and support for individuals. We must be demanding as well that Labour councils defy the 2014 Act in relation to this. But finally, it's only the actions by the organised working class that can cut across the divisions that the bosses try to exploit and put in front of us so that they can drive up their profits. And one of the key ways that they can do that in the first instance is by fighting and having a serious battle against the austerity measures that this government have put in place. Comrades, we will win this struggle. We will defeat the government's attempts to introduce racism into the working class, and we will fight to make sure that we remain united in our battle for a future and a better socialist society.
Thank you very much, Hugo. That's a very important contribution to our rally tonight and ideas for our movement. Now we have a special addition to the rally this evening that we've not yet advertised. We've been sent a video from our sister party in Brazil, preparing in response to the recent election of the racist right-wing Bolsonaro. So hopefully, with the magic of technology, we will now hear from Andre Ferrari, leading member of the CWI, the LSR in Brazil.
First of all, I would like to send warm greetings on behalf of the Brazilian section of the CWI to all the militants and friends of the Socialist Party. The victory of Jair Bolsonaro in the October elections represents a severe threat to the democratic freedoms and to the interests of the workers and the Brazilian people. With Bolsonaro in power, there will be much more freedom of action for fascist gangs and the repressive actions by the state in a qualitative higher level. This threat has provoked a significant reaction from broad sectors of the working class and youth. Before and after the elections, we have seen strong mass demonstrations against Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro's repressive methods have a clear target: to deepen to the extreme the adoption of neoliberal policies against the Brazilian people. But these measures do not find popular support. His election reflects the rotting of the political institutions of bourgeois democracy, and for a significant portion of his voters, the vote for Bolsonaro was a vote against the political system, marked by structural corruption. The rise of Bolsonaro also occurs after one of the most serious economic and social crises in the country's history. The resistance to be effective, it is fundamental that the workers' movement, the movement against oppressions, and the Brazilian left fulfill two fundamental tasks. The first one is to build a united front of working class organizations to resist, united in action against the attacks of the extreme right and its anti-democratic and ultra-neoliberal agenda. At the same time, it is fundamental that a new socialist left, an alternative left to the PT, the Workers' Party, develops. It was the policy of class conciliation, class collaboration, and defense of the political and economic system that opened the way for the extreme right to capitalize on popular dissatisfaction. The LSR the Brazilian section of the CWI is part of the resistance against Bolsonaro, and also, as part of PSOL, we are in the struggle for a new socialist left in Brazil. We count on the support and solidarity of all of you. Thank you very much. Long life to the international struggle of the workers against the right and against capitalism.
And of course, we pledge, in the Socialist Party, pledge our full solidarity with the working class and the CWI in Brazil in preparing those battles that Andre has outlined. Now we move to the first of our two keynote speakers tonight, if you like. And for many of you, Peter Taff needs little introduction. He is the General Secretary of the Socialist Party, and as you know, has dedicated his life to defending and promoting socialist ideas. Because of that, there's many, many ways that I could introduce him about the record of our party, but I want to say this. Tonight, you're going to listen to Peter, but one of the many things that I've tried to learn from him and from the Socialist Party is about listening. You won't have a conversation with Peter where he doesn't tell you about something someone has told him, that he has listened to, has thought about what it revealed. Listening is key to the Marxist tradition and method. We want to truly understand the processes taking place within society beneath the surface, and on that basis, we want to offer a way forward for the struggle for socialism. So please welcome Peter Taff to present the ideas and the perspectives of the Socialist Party tonight.
Comrades, I think that Sarah should make the speech instead of me. I think we've had already a tremendous rally with a galaxy of speakers that shows the achievements of the Socialist Party and the Committee of a Workers' International. And what does these contributions demonstrate? That capitalism daily demonstrates the urgent necessity of socialism, the democratic planned reorganization of the productive resources of society, whether it be in the ravings of the spokespeople of capitalism like Trump, who we said, by the way, when he was elected within a couple of days, will be one of the greatest recruiters to socialism in the US and worldwide. Unconsciously, of course, which is most of the time with Trump. Capitalism gives these demonstrations of what their system is about, of rottenness, of barbarism, of an increasing incapacity to solve the problems of the working class and of humankind. As a matter of fact, the future that is opening up is an even worse prospect for the millions of working people and the poor throughout the planet, of a new capitalist crisis that looms in the not-too-distant future after the devastating crisis of 2007, 2008. And what a marvelous poke in the eye for Trump was the results of the midterm elections. Don't be fooled by the analyses that said, well, he's partially escaped from the criticism and the judgment of the American people. It was, if you like, a mild blue wave. But he lost the popular vote by 7 to 8%. And that's the equivalent of a landslide in Britain if it was in a general election. He should be already under the cosh of a vacating power because of the damage that he's inflicted on working people. And how marvelous these midterm results were of the union buster in Wisconsin, who was beaten by the uprising of the working people of Wisconsin. Of the election of a number of self-proclaimed socialists. That's the music of the future of the US working class. And that is only the precursor to what will develop in the US of a mass party of the working class. This so-called recovery is marked by historically low and stagnant wages. In Britain, as you are all aware by now, worse than any situation for 200 years. The savaging of the NHS, doctors' appointments that are like gold dust, the obscenity of universal credit, which really is another term for universal poverty of broad sections of the working class. Which even the Tories have described, some of them at least, as being cruel. Who could have read the report in the Daily Mirror of a couple of days ago of a 9-year-old child who'd lost their mother who died, whose father had a heart attack and phoned up a charity begging for work. She'd work after hours. She would work at weekends. That's the situation of the very poorest in Britain at the present time. It is absolutely disgraceful and it can't go on. And the Labour movement cannot allow this situation to go on. Of a youth in Cornwall living in a tent. That's the situation in this year of capitalism itself. This oligarchy that controls this society, for that is what it is, a tiny handful of about 8 men controlling 50% of the world's wealth. I was astonished the other day when I read in The Guardian that Joseph Stiglitz has produced new figures to show 3 people in the US control more wealth than the bottom 50% of the US population. This is a thin veneer of democracy to hide the iron grip, the power that they exercise over humankind and over society. You've heard many times at this meeting and others about our indictment of capitalism, of the litany of the crimes of this system. The question that's posed before us is what to do about it. This, of course, implies an analysis, because the very defenders of the system themselves, Theresa May, are actually looking over their shoulder because the system is being challenged and questioned by millions of working people today. When you get a footballer, a very good footballer, like Neville Southall, who happened to play for Everton, no interruptions, my time is precious, who can say that he supports Corbyn right down the line, at least he tells the truth. That's an indication of layers who never supported the Labour movement and a change are moving against this system. The middle class's lifestyle that they've enjoyed in the past will never be enjoyed by their children. No home, no decent job with a living wage, that will be out of the reach of the broad sections of the middle class. This is the new normal for British capitalism. Hence May's attempt to give the system a facelift, allegedly was to see the back of austerity. What a load of hogwash. The cuts will still cascade down on local councils in particular. You all know the situation. We had a marvellous discussion in the Commission today which gave a visible expression in every area of the terrible cuts in the living standards of working people itself. If the Tory government is compelled to make partial retreats on universal credit, if it's compared to the poll tax by John Major, by other figures like Owen Jones, who even went on record and praised the action of the Anti-Poll Tax Federation in a Guardian article and said, you're going to get a poll tax, but never once mentioned the role of militants, even though his parents were members of our party. Therefore, I pursued the habit of a lifetime and wrote to the Guardian, in which I pointed out that the successful anti-poll tax movement was led not by the trade union leaders, not by that sellout Neil Kinnock, but by militants who organised 18 million people not to pay. 35 comrades were jailed, including Dave Nellist, who's speaking at the rally tomorrow, who refused to pay the poll tax and who was scandalously removed undemocratically as a Labour MP for refusing to pay the poll tax. Of course, The Guardian, that great upholder of liberal free speech, never published our letter. Nevertheless, we have the edge over them because we consigned Thatcher to the dustbin of history by the victory over the poll tax. We'd also repeated that earlier in the immortal battle of the heroic 47 comrades in the 1980s. And you know, you cannot stop the truth from coming out. Dawn Butler, a front bench Labour spokesman, when the Labour Party conference was taking place in Liverpool, blurted out, by the way, we're here in this city, and their slogan was to break the law rather than break the poor. The reward from the workers of Liverpool is an abiding, heroic status of those brothers, those comrades, for their achievement. I was interviewed last week by an old foe of ours in Liverpool. I won't give his name. And he complained I'd attacked him in my book, The Rise of Militantism, the book of myself and Tony Mulhern. And he said to me, what's your secret, Peter? Because since I've left Liverpool, I've looked at what happened and how did a small group like you, of what, 50 people, how did you win such a position in Liverpool and nationally? He was, by the way, he wasn't a Scouser, but he had the nous of a Scouse when he looked at the way that our party had developed in Liverpool at that stage. And I said, it's very simple. We had a clear program. We were unflinching in fighting for that program. We connected that program to the idea of a socialist change in society, armed, of course, with the perspective. We worked where the workers were, in the broad organisations, which is what the Labour Party were at that particular moment in time, particularly in the youth section of the Labour Party. And we had an enormous effect on the movement of the working class. What distinguishes this party? What distinguishes our comrades in Spain is an ability not just to mouth phrases, to be windbags in the socialist cause, but to connect the ideas of socialism and Marxism to the movements of the working class, of a small cog that moves the bigger cog of the labour movement, which in turn moves millions of working people into action. They witch hunted us. They drove us out. Aren't they doing the same kind of thing, or trying to do that, to Jeremy Corbyn in an outrageous 3-year campaign of attempted coups that is worthy of Central and Latin America rather than the Labour movement itself? This has been organised by the right, which we call the backstabbing tendency. The only reason they have not launched yet a new right-wing so-called centre party is that they have no confidence that this bird will take flight. They cannot repeat in the modern era the example of the SDP, in which they tried to split the Labour Party. One of the components of such a party would be the Liberal Party. After all, the so moth-eaten is Vince Cable. that they're advertising for a new leader of the Liberal Party at the present time. You could become the leader of the Labour Party if you apply for the job. We had big differences with the left that developed at that stage of momentum, where their idea was you had to pursue a gentle policy of persuasion. We said you will never remove this cancer from the Labour movement without mandatory reselection. Mandatory reselection, John Landsman said to us, that's not on. It's the policy of peaceful persuasion. We said Corbynism without mandatory reselection is like a knife without a blade. The right will never go. They will sabotage. I have a litany here of what's happened in the last 3 years of the campaign against Corbyn. It does not make for pretty reading. And yet it's still not resolved the direction of the Labour movement itself. In fact, the defeat of mandatory reselection at the Labour Party conference, with the existence of a trigger ballot, means that the right are still in situ in the Labour Party itself. That's very dangerous for the future of the Labour Party itself. Because a Labour government, if it comes to power, and the mass of working people want to see the back of this government, it's a question, it's hanging by a thread. This government could collapse at any moment. In one family, the Johnsons, not the most attractive of couples, I admit, but in one family you see the dilemma of the ruling class. One is for Remain, one is for staying, and yet they can agree to get rid of Theresa May. It's possible that a general election could be forced within a matter of weeks. And our answer is not a new referendum. We're opposed to the capitalist EU because it's a neoliberal measure against the working class of the working class. But the answer is not narrow nationalism, but to come out for a socialist and an internationalist approach. There's a yearning by the mass of people in Britain to see the end of this government, and a growing hostility to anything which stands in the way of an election government. But the mood is not a completely uncritical approach towards Corbyn or MacDonald. There's an impatience now, certainly amongst the advanced, more politically developed sections of the working class, who see prevarication at the top, of a capitulation to the right, which bodes very badly in the event of a Labour government coming to power. What is to stop the right then behaving as Ramsay MacDonald did in 1931, when the Labour government was stabbed in the back? They are a fifth column within the Labour Party itself. And the only way to counter them now is to build up a mass left wing on clear socialist and fighting programme. That's why we've applied to rejoin the Labour Party. If the Co-op can be in the Labour Party, then why can't we, with our history of struggle and of our approach towards the mass organisations? And I want to echo a point that Juan Ignacio raised in a different context. If you stand in the way of a mass movement, you will be rolled over. And there's enormous discontent amongst working people today, particularly at local level. In this commission we had today, we had one report after another of the way our comrades are leading campaigns at local level and getting victories. The victories were not over just Tory councils, they were over so-called Labour councils. You are the little butchers that are carrying through the programme of the big butchers in number 10 Downing Street. Get out of the way, or the working class will move against you. And of course, we want Corbyn to succeed in the general election. Let's make it clear from this platform tonight, we will support Corbyn and advocate a vote for Corbyn, probably not standing any candidates in general, if you like, in a general election. But that's something that will be gone into in a bit more detail tomorrow at the rally. But let's make one thing clear tonight to those of you who may not be there tomorrow. Such as the attacks on the conditions of working class people today, that if you go ahead with this program of closing libraries, of the enormous effect, deleterious effect it's having on the schools, of all the other cuts that are taking place, it won't just be the Socialist Party. It'll be librarians. It'll be local government workers. It'll be teachers who will be standing against you at local level, trying to defeat your cuts. And we will be there beside them, supporting them in that struggle. I want to make two quick points before I finish. And that is towards the epic struggle that is developing and is going to develop on a higher plane in the US in the next period. This is going to be one of the classic situations of labor movement history, because we can see the outlines of a mass movement developing that will create a mass party in the US. And one of the most visible signs of that was in the election of Sharma Savant in Seattle. I was there when she spearheaded the $15 an hour campaign. We said then at meetings like this $15 an hour will echo throughout the whole of the US like a prairie fire. And that's what has happened. Our small forces in Seattle, have actually organized this movement. Now that, of course, has produced, that revolution in Seattle has produced a counter, if you like, counter-revolution or attempted counter-revolution, where you have Bezos, who managed to, I hope I'm not stealing the fire of Sharma. Bezos said to the city council, drop your taxes on my company, Amazon. What is Amazon? The richest country in the world, with the CEOs on the way to becoming not a billionaire, but a trillionaire, probably the first trillionaire in the world. How obscene that you have that situation. But Bezos held a gun to the head of Seattle City Council and forced them to back down. I don't know what the present situation is. When we heard that, we said, well, it's a strategy of him to attack Sharma Savant. And we said, well, there's strategies and strategies. And you know the world heavyweight champion, what's his name? Frank, I'm going to say Frank's name. Tyson, that great theoretician, that studier of polls and the movements of the working class, once made a very profound point. He said, I've met many people who've had strategies, but the strategy disappears when you punch them in the mouth. And I say to Bezos, if you're listening here tonight, and who knows, you might have your people here, let's make it quite clear. In the campaign to re-elect Sharma Savant, we're intending to punch you in the mouth. Of course, figuratively speaking, because we are not terrorists. But we intend to organize an army and an international brigade as well that will defend Sharma Savant and the gains of the American working class. Comrades, socialism is knocking at the doors of history. This has been quite a tough period for us in Britain. It's different in the US. They don't move at the different speeds. How marvelous it is to hear Juan Ignacio describe the magnificent movements of the youth and the women in Spain. How marvelous it was in Ireland that our comrades participated and were instrumental in bringing down that terrible abortion situation that existed in Ireland. That's just a little taste of what is coming from the Socialist Party. We do not intend to be elbowed out of the way by any force within the Labour Party. If they don't let us in, we will still participate in the movement as we've done in the last 4 or 5 years. But the march of history shows you have to deal with an idea to defeat it. We are on the march. We have tomorrow the commemoration of the First World War. What a disgrace, the terrible suffering, summed up in the Willie McBride, the folk song. It happened again and again. That was the refrain in that song. And we say to all of those people looking at what is happening tomorrow in commemorating the First World War, it happened again 20 years later. And the war never finished because of the colonial wars that continued. And here we have Trump rattling his nuclear arsenal and threatening Putin and the world with a new Armageddon, a new nuclear Armageddon. We're going to take the power out of your hands. We're going to take the economic power out of your hands. We're going to take the weapons out of your hands and turn them into plowshares. We're going to create a world which is free from the threat of environmental destruction. We're going to create a planned and organized and democratic socialist society that will transform the world. That's a goal we're fighting for. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now we move on to a little bit of audience participation. And I'm going to invite Sarah Rack, who's a member of the Socialist Party's Executive Committee, to give the financial appeal for tonight.
Thanks, Sarah. In her introduction tonight, Sarah said that Marxists stand out for never flinching from the task of organising the working class against the right and against capitalism. And this part of the rally is about what we need to carry out that task. We need ideas, and we've seen from the speeches already tonight that we've certainly got those. We need determination, and from the very enthusiastic flag waving, we've seen that there's plenty of that on display as well. But we also need resources. The Socialist and Labour movement has an enormous and proud history of financial sacrifice by workers to ensure the resources exist to fight capitalism. And nowhere is that more true than in the Socialist Party and in the CWI. And we've shown that in the last year in our fantastic response to the threatened eviction from our national headquarters of 18 years. To aid our search for a new building, we've so far raised £153,000. And that is a huge achievement that represents the pride and commitment of our members and supporters. And we know that that has required real sacrifice from many of you in the room tonight. But we don't have the luxury of taking any step back from asking you to dig deep again. Because we do need a national headquarters, but we also need the resources to maintain our day-to-day work, to produce our newspaper, our magazine, our other political material, to employ our full-time staff, to be fully stocked with campaigning resources. So we've got no choice but to have appeals like these and to be out on the streets every week asking working class people to donate money and to ask our members for regular membership subs, because we're a working class party and the working class is our only source of income. The capitalists have their parties and they have their political representatives. The president of the Federation of Industries of Sao Paulo officially backed Bolsonaro in the Brazilian election, for example. So we have to respond in kind to that kind of backing. In the financial appeal at Socialism 2017 last year, we set an ambitious target of raising £30,000. And we were completely blown away by the response we got when we raised £42,000 in that appeal. So we're confident in, again, asking you for whatever you're able to give to aid the fight for socialism and to aid the party with the ideas to arm the movements that we know are coming. On your seats, you've each got a pink slip that you can fill in with your name and which area you're from. And that means that whatever you donate tonight will be added to the fighting fund total of your local Socialist Party branch. And if you don't have cash on you tonight, or even if you don't feel able to give anything this week, we'd still ask you to think about what you might be able to give on your next payday, for example, or at any time before Christmas, and write an IOU instead. And the final point that I want to make before we start collecting those slips in is that I know many regular attenders here will have thought in advance of tonight about what they might be able to give. And perhaps you've even given a figure to your local Socialist Party organiser. But I want to ask you to think again, to consider, can you increase that amount? Can you double it from £50 to £100? Is there something that you could cut back on in the next week and you could give an extra £10? Do you have a spare £1 in your pocket that you could add to what you were planning to give? If everyone in the hall increased their planned pledge by £1 or £2, we'd increase our total by over 1,000. So I'd like to start by asking if there's anyone in the room who's able to donate £2,000 or more. And the stewards are available. If you put your hand up, we'll be able to collect those. And while the stewards are bringing those forward, you might be wondering, how can a working class party be getting contributions of that amount? And our members and supporters don't have a lot of money, but sometimes might find themselves able to give more, perhaps through a bereavement, a redundancy, or the sale of a house. And of course, giving those donations shows real dedication in often difficult times in that comrade's life. But so do the smaller amounts from comrades who are not in that situation. To us, £5 or £10 from someone who's unemployed or a school student is just as important, and I will be asking for those amounts in a moment too. So we've got our first donation here from Anonymous in the West Midlands of £2,000.
I'm very pleased to be introducing our second keynote speaker. The first time that Sharma spoke at one of our rallies was in 2014, when she was newly elected, and the term American Socialist sounded strange, sent a thrill down our spines. How much has changed in those 4 years? Trump's presidency has deepened political polarization and further undermined the credibility of the institutions of capitalism, including both corporate political parties. The search for an alternative and the interest in socialist ideas is blossoming, and it is a joy to behold. And this week we saw more socialists elected in the US. More than that, we are seeing workers taking strike action, learning from experience, and even winning. For many reasons, since the world economic crisis 10 years ago, the eyes of those who fight for change in the world have been turned towards the US, to Occupy, to the $15 campaign, to the fight against Trump. And our sister party, Socialist Alternative, has been raising the need for a socialist alternative. And this year in October held its biggest ever national convention. So here to tell us all about the situation in the US, the fight for socialism there. Please give a warm welcome to Sharma Sawant.
Comrades and friends, it is so incredible to be here with you all. Thank you so much for having Socialist Alternative as part of your important rally. And I am so thrilled to bring you solidarity from the US working class and revolutionary greetings from Socialist Alternative. Which is the American section of the Committee for Workers International, and in solidarity with the Socialist Party here. As others have said, it was a landmark event that Trump was elected, an open, bigot, right-wing, racist, misogynist, a worker hater, and by his election, there is no question that the right wing in the United States is emboldened. However, we would be making a historical mistake if we concluded from that the United States, the working class of the United States, was moving rightward. Because as a matter of fact, as Sarah said, this is really an indication of an era of social upheaval, an era of sharp polarization. Because alongside Trump's election, we have also seen massive protests like they haven't been seen in some of our lifetimes. We have seen a rebirth of activism in the United States with a new layer of young people moving into struggle such as has not been seen in the last 40 years. We saw the biggest ever single day of protests in the US history the day after Trump's election, in 2016, and we saw massive student walkouts that same day. And more recently, we have seen the Me Too struggle really come into its own in many ways through the street expression of young women with a militant voice against the Kavanaugh appointment. And while the Kavanaugh appointment did go through and the protests were ultimately unsuccessful, the Me Too struggle that came out on the streets against Kavanaugh had the appointment of a Supreme Court justice hanging by a thread. And the ramming through of Kavanaugh has led many young women and working women to draw more far-reaching conclusions about the bankruptcy of the institutions of US capitalism. We saw the enormous protests, one-day protests internationally by Google workers a few days ago. 20,000 Google workers walked out, starting with my home country, India, and then going on at 11 a.m. Having coordinated protests at 11 a.m. on every continent, from Mumbai to Zurich to London to Dublin, and then to New York City and Seattle and Mountain View, the headquarters of Google. The workers fighting against sexual harassment on the workplace, demanding an end to forced arbitration, and also demanding equal pay for equal work. And just yesterday, we've heard that the workers won their victory on their first demand, which is an end to forced arbitration on sexual harassment cases. What is even more striking about the Google walkout is that they cited the workers. These are tech workers, extremely well-paid, very well-educated, coming from some of the most privileged layers. They said that they were inspired to take action by the Me Too struggle and by McDonald's workers who last month engaged in a one-day work stoppage against sexual harassment. Comrades, what an incredible thread of history is woven by working class people, that some of the most oppressed workers who work at McDonald's are able to inspire some of the most privileged workers in Google and really encourage, encourage a real action, workplace action on many issues that are related to identity. But we have seen such tectonic shifts on the labor movement in the United States. As many of us have said before, we are seeing the reawakening of a sleeping giant of the US working class. And what more tremendous example can there be this year of that than the 9-day illegal wildcat strike by the teachers in West Virginia? West Virginia was one of 2 states for which every county voted for Trump. We could make the mistake of easily dismissing them as a red state, conservative people, no hope. But this was the state in which not only did they have a successful strike action, but that strike action by teachers ignited a wave of strike actions and resistance by teachers in blue states like my state in Washington. These are teachers who led a militant rank-and-file struggle that stood up against a bankrupt and rotten leadership and provided a fighting strategy, an alternative to the cautious and ineffective and ultimately betrayal of business unionism, providing class struggle as an alternative to class snuggle, which is collaboration with the bosses. And one of the most important indications of the times we live in and the true consciousness of American working class people is the growth of the openness to socialist ideas. When we won the first election in 2013, bourgeois commentators, many Democratic Party operatives, wanted to dismiss it as some sort of idiosyncratic, some unique thing that can happen only in Seattle because it's a strange left-wing city. But we are now seeing the rise, the incredible explosion of membership in the Democratic Socialists of America, with a record number of candidates running as self-described socialists. And Sarah mentioned the tremendous convention that Socialist Alternative just had. And Socialist Alternative has not just grown in the past period, but it has grown with a very decisive working class character, with everywhere from bartenders to waitresses to tech workers joining the organization because they recognize how important it is to develop the Marxist movement. So at this moment, comrades and friends, in the United States and also globally, I would say, the question is not, should we fight the right wing? The question is, how will we fight the right wing and how will we defeat them? And that is why analysis matters, and then action based on that analysis matters. The analysis of Socialist Alternative is that Trump, who was a known predator, who was elected as a predator-in-chief, that happened as an expression of the most predatory phase of American capitalism, of huge anger against the status quo, against establishment politics, and a complete and utter disgust at the corruption of politics in the United States. Trump dishonestly ran as a representative of the so-called forgotten men and women, by which he meant the enormous working class layers that have been left out of the lion's share of prosperity that has been seen in the last many decades. Trump, we know, is a con man, and in reality has represented the billionaire class in office, and there's example after example of that. But with Clinton standing for a continuation of status quo corporate politics, and with Bernie Sanders out of the race, Trump was able to narrowly win in spite of losing the popular vote by posing as a candidate for the people. And this conclusion, correct conclusion, that the election of Trump was a rejection of establishment politics and of corruption, has been furiously resisted by the Democratic Party leadership. But even they are having to look seriously at their own program by the midterm election results, as Peter and others have mentioned, was a decisive and pronounced indictment of Trump's politics. And yes, it was not a massive blue wave in the way that people would have liked to see, and there's a little bit of confusion about what the results actually represent. However, and you can see bourgeois media and pro-Democratic Party media saying that this confirms moderation is the way to go, and of course we don't agree with that. What we are seeing in the midterm results is that even though the Republicans continue to make a few gains, what stands out is that despite the fact that the Democratic establishment has failed to provide any real alternative to the working class went to the polls in record numbers in many counties, breaking the records for voter turnout because they wanted their vote to represent a rejection of Trump and the right wing. We saw 3 states pass minimum wage increases. 3 cities in California passed a tax on big business. We saw, through a ballot initiative in Florida, one of the states that is often dismissed as conservative, 1.5 million people with felony charges being given the right to vote, which is an indictment of the mass incarceration and racist system in the US. And we saw the election of self-proclaimed socialists like Rashida Tlaib, who is a DSA candidate who is now in Congress, Julia Salazar, who is a DSA member who is now in the New York State Senate, and also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is going into Congress. But, comrades and friends, this poses the question of what the Democratic Party actually is going to do. Because the majority is hungry for a fundamental shift from the misery that is on offer to them every single day. So the Democrats are going to be put to the test. Both establishment Democrats in terms of how out of touch they persist in remaining from the voice of their own base, but also the left wing and even socialist candidates who've been elected to the Democratic Party will be put to the test, because while there will be what we call a so-called honeymoon period for them, that is not going to be eternal, because the American working class is impatient and is looking for serious change. And we know that is not going to come from Nancy Pelosi, who has declared that Congress will now become a bipartisan marketplace of ideas. And if you know anything in America, you'll know that bipartisan means screw the working class. And she has refused to even take up the question of impeaching Trump. Tied to all of this, comrades and friends, is also the important question of what happens in the labor movement. Because one of the reasons the Democratic Party have such a stranglehold against the creation of a real left alternative is how tied at the hip the labor bureaucracy is to the Democratic establishment. And so this brings up the question of how effectively the rank and file in the labor movement are going to be willing, and are they going to really clash with their own leaders, just like the West Virginia teachers did. So nothing is certain, but there is a huge potential such as has never existed before. There are also the questions of whether or not to participate in the elections in the first place. Understandably, there is a lot of questioning among young people, because when they see the Republicans and the Democrats and no real choice on offer other than some real differences on social issues, but no real choice on changing lives in any way, understandably young people can draw the conclusion that maybe electoral politics itself is defunct, and what we need to do is build movements on the streets. And there is no doubt a serious truth in the fact that the backbone of social movements are going to be movements on the streets and struggles in the workplace, because electoral politics, in the way that it is posed in the bourgeois context, especially in the United States, is not the most fertile ground for making change. However, we should not make the mistake of rejecting electoral questions altogether, because we have shown that in reality, what we need is we have shown in Seattle that in reality, what the working class needs is for mass movements to really ignite the working class nationally, but through those movements, having our own independent candidates elected who can pose a serious alternative to the Democratic Party and show that the way forward does not lie from inside the Democratic Party, but by building independent political organizations and ultimately looking towards a revolutionary party for the American working class. As Peter said, our fight for 15 did not remain limited to Seattle, but really started a trend nationwide, and our 15 Now movement that began in Seattle has gone nationwide. But we won this in Seattle not by relying on the goodwill of other elected Democrats and the Democratic Party, lobbyists and so on, or backroom negotiations. We won that by defiantly and openly rejecting that kind of approach and saying, no, we're going to go to the streets, we're going to go to the doors, we're going to go to the working class of Seattle that we know needs to be empowered to win this, because it is absolutely ludicrous to put our faith in big business and the politicians that serve them. But this was important because in America, there is the bourgeois parties have created this idea. It's a mythical idea, but it's an idea that is pervasive, that it's all fine and good when you're an activist, but once you get elected, you need to work with the system. You need to behave yourself. You need to behave yourself. Be nice. And we have often confronted that by saying that being nice to the establishment means only one thing: betraying the interests of the working class. And we have used that approach not just to win $15 an hour. We have won a whole host of renters' rights, and through the People's Budget movement have won serious victories, but not just the victories, but have really mobilized working class people to fight for themselves and to build organized resistance to build that fight. One of our arch enemies, a lead lobbyist for the landlord corporations, said when he retired last year that every dollar that the landlord lobby spent on Seattle City Council was wasted because of the army of Sawant. And I think that is not a compliment to any individual. It is a recognition of the power that comes from organized working class movements that also have their own voice that builds with them inside City Hall, and this can be done inside the halls of Congress as well. And sometimes your enemies give you the best compliments. But we saw through the tax Amazon struggle that when you take on the might of the richest man in the world, it is not a straightforward struggle. And even though it was historically incredible that we won the tax, less than a month later, it was repealed by 7 of the 9 council members on the Seattle City Council. They were all Democrats. Shame. Absolutely cowardly, shameful capitulation. But the lesson from this is precisely what Socialist Alternative has been saying, that you cannot rely on politicians, even if they might be well-meaning, and some of them are, because if they base themselves on the strategy of backroom negotiations rather than coming out and standing with the movement, then it is not going to be possible to actually fight for working people. We saw that, of course, in a much more amplified way through the betrayals of Syriza that Juan Ignacio mentioned. So I will close on this, comrades and friends. The working class, socialist young people today have an enormous responsibility on our shoulders to defeat the right wing, its attacks on immigrants, women, LGBTQ people, attacks on workers and the labor movement. But to do so in the United States and globally, we will need to build ongoing mass movements, but also raise the question of working class parties that are independent of corporate money and corporate power. Because time is short. Across the world, we see billions relegated to poverty and misery. In Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, this year on the West Coast, in this summer, we saw unprecedented wildfires that brought to life, literally in front of your eyes, the crisis of climate change. And we have seen capitalism's inability to even slow climate catastrophe, much less stop it. In its single-minded pursuit of profit, in the competition between multinationals based in different countries, furiously fighting against regulation that could slow climate change. So as the human costs become greater and greater, the urgency of building not only mass movements, but the Marxist leadership of these movements becomes ever more urgent. As we know, the only viable alternative is the leadership of the working class through a revolutionary movement. And for that to happen, we will need to build the Socialist Party here, Socialist Alternative in the United States, IR in the Spanish state, and so on and so forth. We will need a Marxist movement on every continent. And I will also make an appeal here. As Peter said, our election next year in Seattle is of global significance because it will be an almighty battle against the capitalist class in the US. And our election will be a referendum on one single question. Who controls Seattle? Is it Amazon and billionaires like Bezos, or is it the working class? And we want the correct answer to that question by winning the election. Onward to world socialism. Thank you.